It was a quiet Tuesday night when Emma began her midnight shift at the local Walmart. She had worked there for a few months, finding the night shifts preferable for their calm and the chance to work without the usual daytime rush. Little did she know, this night would be anything but ordinary. The store was vast and eerily silent, the fluorescent lights casting a cold, sterile glow over the aisles. The usual hum of distant conversations and the beeping of cash registers were absent, leaving an unsettling stillness in their place. Emma clocked in, grabbed her vest, and headed to the electronics department, her assigned section for the night. As she made her way through the empty store, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She chalked it up to the quiet and tried to focus on her tasks. Her first job was to restock the shelves, which was usually a straightforward task. Tonight, however, it felt different. There was an unexplainable heaviness in the air. About an hour into her shift, Emma heard a strange noise coming from one of the aisles. It was a soft, almost rhythmic tapping, like someone gently drumming their fingers on a surface. She paused, listening intently, but the noise stopped as suddenly as it had started. She shrugged it off and continued her work, but the sense of unease lingered. As the night wore on, the noises became more frequent. Emma heard faint whispers, distant footsteps, and occasionally, a strange scraping sound that seemed to follow her. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Around 3 a.m., Emma decided to take a break. She made her way to the break room, hoping a cup of coffee would help clear her mind. The break room was dimly lit, with only a flickering fluorescent light casting long shadows across the room. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down, her back to the door. As she sipped her coffee, Emma heard the door creak open. She turned around, expecting to see one of her co-workers, but the room was empty. The door swung slowly on its hinges, then closed with a soft click. Emma's heart raced. She was certain she had heard someone enter. She stood up, her eyes scanning the room, but there was no one there. Feeling unnerved, Emma decided to return to the electronics department. As she walked through the store, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shadows seemed to move with her, and the whispers grew louder, forming unintelligible words. She quickened her pace, eager to be back in the relative safety of her section. When she reached the electronics department, she found that the lights had gone out. The only illumination came from the flickering screens of the TVs and computers. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She knew the lights had been on when she left. She fumbled for her flashlight, her hands trembling, and turned it on, casting a narrow beam of light through the darkness. Emma began to check the aisles, her flashlight casting long, eerie shadows. As she turned a corner, she saw a figure standing at the far end of the aisle. It was a man, his back to her, dressed in dark, tattered clothes. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She called out, "Sir, the store is closed. You need to leave." The man didn't respond. He remained motionless, his head slightly tilted to one side. Emma took a step closer, her flashlight shaking in her hand. "Sir, did you hear me? You need to leave." Still no response. She took another step, and the man slowly turned to face her. Emma gasped. The man's eyes were hollow and empty, his face pale and gaunt. He stared at her with a vacant expression, his lips moving silently as if trying to speak. Emma took a step back, her mind racing. She knew she should call for help, but she was frozen in place, unable to look away from the man's haunting gaze. Suddenly, the man let out a low, guttural moan and began to shuffle towards her. Emma's paralysis broke, and she turned and ran, her flashlight beam bouncing wildly as she sprinted through the aisles. She could hear the man's footsteps behind her, slow and deliberate, but gaining on her with every second. Emma reached the front of the store, her heart pounding in her ears. She ran to the manager's office, hoping to find help or at least a place to hide. The door was locked. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking, but finally managed to unlock the door and slip inside, locking it behind her. Inside the office, Emma quickly grabbed the phone and dialed 911. As she waited for the operator to answer, she glanced at the security monitors, hoping to see where the man was. The screens showed various parts of the store, but there was no sign of the man. The operator answered, and Emma quickly explained her situation, her voice trembling. "Please stay on the line," the operator said. "Officers are on their way." Emma nodded, even though the operator couldn't see her. She kept her eyes on the monitors, her heart racing. Suddenly, one of the screens flickered and went black, then another, and another. Soon, all the screens were dark, and the room was plunged into silence. Emma felt a cold chill run down her spine. She knew she wasn't alone. The whispers started again, louder and more insistent. She could hear them all around her, coming from the walls, the floor, the ceiling. She clutched the phone tightly, trying to focus on the operator's voice. "Officers are almost there," the operator said. "Stay with me." Emma nodded again, tears streaming down her face. She could hear the man's footsteps outside the door, slow and deliberate. He was close, so close. She backed away from the door, her eyes darting around the room, looking for anything she could use to defend herself. The footsteps stopped. The silence was deafening. Emma held her breath, straining to hear any sound. Suddenly, the door handle rattled, and the door began to creak open. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she had locked it. How was he getting in? The door swung open, and the man stood there, his hollow eyes staring at her. Emma screamed and dropped the phone, backing away until she was pressed against the wall. The man stepped into the room, his lips moving silently, his eyes never leaving hers. Emma's mind raced. She had to do something, anything. She grabbed a heavy bookend from the desk and hurled it at the man. It hit him square in the chest, but he didn't flinch. He kept moving towards her, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Just as the man was about to reach her, the sound of sirens filled the air. The man's expression changed, a flicker of fear crossing his face. He turned and shuffled out of the office, disappearing into the darkness of the store. Emma collapsed to the floor, sobbing with relief. Moments later, the police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They found Emma in the manager's office, trembling and incoherent. She tried to explain what had happened, but her words came out in a jumbled mess. The officers searched the store but found no sign of the man. The security cameras had all been disabled, and there were no footprints or other evidence to suggest anyone had been there. The police chalked it up to a case of severe stress and fatigue, but Emma knew what she had seen. She never returned to work at Walmart. The experience had shaken her to her core, and she couldn't bring herself to step foot in the store again. She moved to a new town, trying to put the incident behind her, but the memory of that night stayed with her. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the man was still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting. She knew she would never forget his hollow eyes and the chilling whispers that haunted her dreams. And every time she passed a Walmart, she felt a shiver run down her spine, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the most unexpected places.